How do we prepare for foot and mouth disease or avian influenza or an intentional contamination of the food supply? Well, typically we learn the science, we identify key messages that we want to communicate, and we practice our risk communications. But every scenario, each and every scenario is unique, and we can't fully predict the future. So we don't know how, when, or where foot and mouth disease will next enter the United States. We don't know who will contaminate the food supply, what food they will contaminate, and how many people might be affected. So we need to develop a risk communication strategy that is flexible and adaptable. And we also need to recognize that the risk communication strategy changes as the situation evolves. Let me share 3 types of examples. 1, the claim. Someone claims that they have contaminated the food supply. Well, when we hear a claim, we don't know whether it's true or false. In many cases, we don't know where this claimed occurrence happened, and we don't know the extent of the problem. How do we handle that situation? Well, from risk communication, we know we handle it by telling people exactly what we do know, what we don't know, what we're doing to answer the questions we don't know, and when we'll get back to them with more information. Another example, a threat. So a threat that we will introduce this disease, we will contaminate this piece of food. Then our opportunity is again to share what we know about the threat, to share what we're doing to protect that animal population or that food system, and to provide people the reassurance that we'll be back with more information as the situation develops. The third is the hoax. Many of the claims, many of the threats turn out to be a hoax. Now, hoaxes come from many different reasons or purposes, people trying to extort money or create fear or blackmail. But the bottom line is hoaxes can scare people just as much as a real incident. So we need to be sympathetic and sensitive to the hoax. At the same time, we need to express our frustration and our anger if this threat turns out to be a hoax. It's perfectly acceptable and appropriate for you to share your frustration with the audiences with whom you're dealing. It makes you more credible. You know, if I were in New Zealand and I were trying to respond, or I were recovering from the situation where the hoax, where a college student said they had introduced foot and mouth disease to the island off the New Zealand coast, and that caused the government to spend millions of dollars to respond, and it caused the whole cattle industry to hunker down to try to prevent a larger problem. Well, once we found out it was a hoax, I would have been mad. And it's appropriate to share as a risk communication spokesperson. This incident, this foot and mouth incident, turns out to be a hoax. It is frustrating for us who are working to protect the agriculture of our nation to deal with hoaxes like this. Hoaxes that waste public resources dealing with threats that aren't real. We've got to move beyond this. It's time for us to recover, and it's time for us to learn the lessons. But we still are frustrated with hoaxes. So, remember that as we study foot and mouth disease or avian influenza or intentional contamination of the food supply, we need to be prepared to evolve our risk communication approach as the incident develops.